So I usually get the question, Dr. Amanda, I hear all that you're talking about with, diabetes and what we can do to manage our blood sugars, how we can feel better, how we can prevent blood sugar spikes. But I want to know, do I have to have this for the rest of my life? Like, can my diabetes go away? And in the medical terms, we say, can it be reversed or put into remission? But people are really concerned about this, and I definitely understand because I don't want to have this chronic illness or this chronic disease that follows me for the rest of my life. Can I actually get rid of this? Can I reverse this diabetes, that this diagnosis that was placed upon me? And I know that it can feel overwhelming. It can feel very um, sometimes put you in a depressed mood. I've had patients that come in, I'm like, oh yeah, your A1C is now 6.5. So technically that puts you in a diabetic range. And that just a somber comes over their face. And it's just like, hate to give that news for people. And some people are like, oh my gosh, it's not like, the worst thing ever. But for some, it is definitely a diagnosis that comes with a heavy burden. And that's because we've seen our family members go through this. We've seen our family members, end up on dialysis. We've seen our family members end up losing limbs, having strokes or heart attacks, all because of this things we call diabetes. Okay, so um, it does not have to be permanent. So I just wanted to spoil the whole thing right now. It does not have to be permanent. Yes, we can say it absolutely can be reversed. We'll actually say we'll go into remission. We call that remission in lifestyle medicine. So, but some people are like, nope, once you have it forever. But I do not want to ever have people have that where there's no hope, right? Because we want to always have hope, okay? So today I want to make sure we walk through this and see how can um, remission happen for diabetes type 2. I'm still going to talk about type 2, not where you have an autoimmune disorder that is beyond the scope of this talk. Some you have to go deeper into your lifestyle medicine or your endocrinologist to sometimes talk about the autoimmune aspect of that. But we're talking about how it relates to lifestyle. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is like what diabetes type 2 actually is, what people mean when they say, can it be reversed, and what we mean by reversal or remission, and what can improve in our bodies, and what determines how much improvement is possible. That is going to be very key. How can we determine how much improvement is possible and what actually helps our body move in that direction? Okay. Because the conversation that we have, especially on this channel here, we're not talking about labels. We want to talk about what our body is capable of doing over time. Okay. So what we're able to do over time. Okay. So what really happens in type 2 diabetes? Okay. It's not just about high blood sugars. Okay. I know that's the outcome that we always look at. We look at where you come into your doctor's office and we're like, what has your blood sugars been? Here's your lab. This is your A1C. This is what's telling us what it's like over the past 3 months, what it's been like. It's actually really a deeper issue than just what your blood sugar numbers are. It's more of how your body is handling this glucose. Okay. Glucose, sugar. For those, I'm going to use them interchangeably, like glucose. So when I glucose, I'm meaning your blood sugar. Okay. So when you eat, your body actually breaks down into glucose because, again, if you watched any of my previous videos talking about diabetes, you know that we talk about glucose and everything breaks down into glucose because that's what your body uses as energy. Okay. And especially for your brain, it does not recognize a banana. It does not recognize French fries. It recognizes glucose. Okay. So that's what it wants. So your body breaks everything down into glucose. The glucose, the sugar, enters your bloodstream. Okay. Then insulin, which we talked about before, is a hormone that helps our body move the glucose or the sugar from the cells, from the bloodstream into the cells. Okay. So that's the key. We have to get the glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells where it actually works for our energy. Okay. Over time, though, in type 2 diabetes, that the cells become less responsive to the insulin, and that's called insulin resistance. And even if you don't have type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance is very prevalent, and it starts earlier than actually when diabetes shows up. So we want to be very alert. We want to know what's going on in our body to know if we are starting to develop insulin resistance. Okay. There can be signs on your body that you can start to tell insulin resistance. Usually, I have people look for changes in your skin and texture, like behind your neck or underneath your arms, like a dark velvety type skin. It actually changes from like the rest of your skin. You can actually look at that, and it's usually, like I said, on the back of the neck or underneath the arms. And this can actually start to show some insulin resistance. Again, your blood sugar, when you check it or when you have your blood test drawn, it can be normal. And you're like, well, I don't have diabetes, so I'm fine. So, but no, we want to start to look at that insulin resistance signs. Okay. So when glucose stays in your blood sugar longer than it should, okay, that's when we get concerned. Okay. And then over time, the blood sugar levels start to rise. So you start with the insulin resistance. Your body's not recognizing the insulin, and therefore the glucose is staying in the bloodstream longer, and it's not getting into our cells where we need it. So we are feeling tired, right? Because we're not getting the energy. We're like, I'm eating, and I still feel tired, or I get that itis afterwards. You know what we say there. But you're like, why don't I feel energized? Like Dr. Mandy said, I'm supposed to feel energized after I eat, and I don't. And that sugar is staying in the bloodstream instead of getting to the cells where they need to work and actually give us the energy that we need. Okay. So what we need to actually, excuse me, really notice is that we need to improve our insulin sensitivity, how our body handles glucose, and overall metabolic function. Okay. So not just temporarily lowering our blood sugar numbers. Okay. So I know that feels good. And we want to see those numbers go down, right? That actually is the result of everything else that we do. We want to see those numbers go down. Okay. So I know that was heavy on like biochemistry, looking at stuff like Dr. Amanda, like, ooh, what in the world are you talking about? But I just like for people to be informed, to know what's going on in the body, to know like why is it so important that my blood sugars, like what is the significance of my blood sugars being high? Okay. So if you have any questions, I will invite you now to put any questions in the chat. I will come back and answer those if I cannot answer them live. And don't forget to like the video, share the video with others, anyone that you know of that may have diabetes, or that has a diagnosis of diabetes, or someone that you know of a family member that has diabetes. Okay. So just like the more we're informed, the more we're likely to get this reversal going on. Okay. So reversal, what does it really mean? Okay. After you share, then we'll go into the reversal. So let's see you guys let's see you guys share, say hello in the chat so we can continue on. So we can learn how and what we can do to make sure we get rid of this diagnosis of diabetes. Okay. So for most people, reversal means that my blood sugar is back to normal. My A1C is no longer in the diabetic range, or I don't need medication anymore. Right. So, and yes, some people do reach that point, and but we're here to talk about a more important discussion. Okay. Distinction between those things. So those will be the endpoints. Yes, your blood sugar numbers will be better. Yes, your A1C will be back less than 5.7, even though the diabetic range is 6.5. I like to say less than 5.7. That means you're not even in the pre-diabetes range. And no longer need the medication. That is a good key one. Like no longer need medications, because your A1C can be back within a good range, and your blood sugars will be normal, but you can still be on medication. So technically, that will be just like you're managing your blood sugars. Okay, so that's a good distinction to realize. Okay, so what we really want to know is the important thing, that this does not mean that the underlying tendency completely disappears. Remember, we're going deep, deep, deep. We're not just looking at the results of what is going on. We want to actually get rid of the underlying cause. So that way we can truly say that we have been in this reversal. So I hope you guys can hear me. It looks like it's freezing up there, but keep going. Okay, so if there's a pause there, just know I'm going to keep going. You can come back and watch it. Okay. So what are we looking at? A deeper understanding of what's going on to actually help the underlying cause, so we can actually get this to disappear. So what we want to actually look at is that insulin resistance. Our body has shown that it can develop insulin resistance. So we want to know that the environment that we create still matters. Okay. So we want to actually make sure that we are giving our body that environment to where the insulin resistance is not able to flourish. Okay. So again, with genetics, people are like, well, I know I'm going to get, diabetes because everyone in my family had it. Remember that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Okay. So we don't want to pull that trigger. So it can be a loaded gun does not cause any issues until that trigger is pulled and the bullet goes flying out. Okay. So we want to actually get rid of the trigger finger, take that off, and put the genetics to the side somewhere. Okay. So we want to make sure we have that environment that has a loving, caring environment for us to actually be able to nurture and grow, and not grow insulin resistance, right? So think of it like this. If your numbers improve, it's because your body is responding to new patterns, okay? And if those patterns change again, so say I'm going to, change my eating habits for the next 6 months, my A1C now is down to 5.4. I can now finally go back to drinking my Coca-Cola, eating my cheesecake at night, drinking my wine, and because I'm good, like my diabetes is gone. We don't want to do that, okay? Because that is now nurturing that environment to bring back that insulin resistance, okay? So if we get rid of the patterns that changes our internal system that actually helps us to decrease the insulin resistance, then we're going to go back to focusing on that insulin resistance or nurturing that insulin resistance. So we don't want to do that. So instead of focusing on the word reversal, I want to focus on a more powerful question, or a more helpful question, to how can my body improve with consistent support? Okay. So consistent support. So we want to make sure we're supporting our body to make sure we get a good environment internally to actually help with nurturing our body to decrease insulin resistance. Okay. So it's usually more than what we expect. Okay. So let's slow down and really talk about what changes can occur in our body. Okay. So, because this is where people either gain hope or miss it, okay? And when your daily patterns begin to shift, especially with your food, movement, sleep, stress, the 4 things I usually talk about all the time, your body starts responding in ways that are measurable, not just on paper. But how do you feel day after day? But in how you feel day after day, okay? So that's what we want to focus on, okay? So first, insulin sensitivity can improve. So again, that's what our focus is. We want to actually improve our insulin sensitivity. So right now, if you have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, your cells are not responding sufficiently to the insulin that you have, okay? So think of it like this. Insulin is like knocking on the door of your cells, trying to improve the glucose inside, trying to move the glucose inside, okay? But the door isn't opening easily because it's all that gunk there. And we talked about what that gunk was before, okay? So when insulin sensitivity improves, then the door opens easily again. It opens and closes, okay? Which means glucose moves out of the bloodstream and into our cells more efficiently. Okay, so that's what we want. Okay, so the blood sugars does not stay elevated as long, and our body does not produce as much insulin. And that's the major shift that we want. We don't want our body to produce a lot of insulin. We just want it to produce enough insulin to get what we ate out of the bloodstream into our cells. Okay. Yes, we got it. We got it. Okay. All right. Don't forget to put your questions in if it's a lot, because I know that this is a little bit more heavy, like I said, in the biochem realm than most videos that you may see me come on here do. But I really want you to understand. So it's not just about like what you see on the outside, it's what's going on the inside that helps, because reversal or remission can happen, but we want to not just get there, we want to stay there. Okay, so once we actually help with that insulin sensitivity, we want to actually see, second, we want to see the blood sugar patterns become more stable. So instead of blood sugar spikes after meals, long periods of elevated blood sugars and then sudden drop, because then all that glucose is gone, we start to begin to see more slow rise after we eat, because that's what should happen. Our blood sugar should rise after we eat because we're eating it, everything's turning into glucose, and then gradually returns to baseline and our numbers become more predictable. And that stability reduces the stress inside our body, because remember, most of our chronic illnesses are due to chronic stress, and the stress can become from the foods that we eat. Okay, so we want to reduce that stress over time. We don't want the real highs and the big lows. Okay, so we want to actually kind of stabilize. Our body likes stability. Everybody likes stability, even though nothing stays the same. But our body likes that steadiness. Okay. So third, our blood sugar, fasting blood sugars may begin to come down. So fasting blood sugars. So that is very good. So like that number in the morning, you don't feel so frustrated that it's like, why is it high in the morning no matter what? Or it's high even before I eat. Okay. So we start to see that improvement because our body actually starts to regulate overnight more effectively. So again, we talked about stopping eating at certain times, what we eat, and actually decreasing that inflammation. So then, therefore, our bodies are like, oh, yes, that is better. Now I can actually I can actually start to repair and rebuild and detox during this time instead of just trying to put out these fires of this chronic inflammation, right? Our body is actually starting to respond. Then actually we see that blood sugars come down, fasting blood sugars come down, the insulin sensitivity starts to get better. We actually then see that A1C, that 3-month blood sugar, starts to trend downward. And we usually wait 3 months to check it just because it does. That's a 3 months average. Okay. So this reflects our average over time, that A1C, hemoglobin A1C. So if you don't have that, you don't know that number, you should know your number. You should know your number. Yes, I get mine checked too, just to make sure to see where that level is going. Okay. So with the A1C, we see that number trend down over time. It actually shows that our daily habits are improving, our average is improving, and even a small shift are meaningful. Like those small shifts, those small changes become, you see that downward trend. Okay. It may not go from, 8 to 6.5 immediately, even though I've seen that. Like some people, they really take a hone in, they go deep, they're like, Dr. Amanda, you said diabetes, that's all I need to hear. And I got my self into gear because I do not want that. I've seen that what's happened to that in my family. And every time I talk about, the changes that one can make with a diagnosis of diabetes, I always think back to one of like my first few years in practice, to where I had a young lady like in her late 30s, early 40s, somewhere around that. And she would come in, like, yeah. And like her numbers were just like creeping up. Like I'll say, hey, let's look at your numbers here. What's your blood sugars, A1C? And then one time she came in and actually her A1C had hit that 6.5 mark. And she was devastated because she had been like playing around in that pre-diabetes range for a little while, because I was able to look back over previous records that she's had before I started seeing her. But as soon as it hit that 6.5 range, she was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, this I'm not doing medicine. What else can I do? What else can I do? And even though this was before my lifestyle medicine days, I was like, all I know is medication. She was like, nope, Dr. Man, I'm not doing that. I will see, what I can do, change, whatever I have to do, because I'm not doing medications. I don't like needles. I don't like pills. I don't want to do any of it. Okay. And again, it was like that 3 month time frame. Again, this was before I would like no say you want to do X, Y, and Z. But I was like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And I just told her about my own experience before I actually again was trained with lifestyle medicine, but just what I've been doing had been doing for myself. Because she was like, well, how do you do that? Because I would say, my family members, they have, a diagnosis of diabetes, uncles and aunts and grandparents, she's like, well, what did you do? And so, because people would see me and think that there was no struggle, nothing that I had to do. It's just like you were always, on the thinner side or something like that. And I'm like, no, that was not the case. I was an obese teenager having insulin resistance because, like I said, I was telling you to look out for those signs. I was looking at those, looking back at pictures, realizing that I had those signs of insulin resistance, and it's like, okay, I need to change something. I did not know that at the time. I was, between the ages of, 14 and 16. I don't know. I didn't know what insulin resistant was. I knew high blood sugars from family members, but I didn't know what insulin resistance was. But looking back at pictures, I can say, oh, yes, I definitely had that. But so I was just, sharing my own experience with her of, how I would be eating, the exercises I was doing. I was really into that time running like races and things of that nature, really getting into physical fitness, weightlifting. I shouldn't say weightlifting. I wasn't weightlifting. I was doing weight resistance training and things of that nature. And like she picked up on those things. And again, this was before I knew what lifestyle medicine was, but just my own experience actually living out lifestyle medicine, and that actually has helped her. And she was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then 3 months later, she came back and her A1C was no longer even in the pre-diabetes range. It was back to normal. And so I was like, oh man, that was a powerful story to always remember, because I just remember how adamant she was about not having that diagnosis of diabetes, and how she took control of her own health and saying, no, I'm not going to let this happen to me, even though I have this genetic makeup. I am not going to have my finger on the trigger and pull that trigger. So I'm going to take my trigger finger off and put that away and actually make some different changes. So that is what she did. And still to this day, it's amazing, 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 amazing for me to hear and know that it was encouragement even before this Atkins Enlightenment Lifestyle Medicine training that I had, but it is just wonderful. And knowing that I still try to live out these things to actually be examples for others to actually learn this. Okay. So you can do it too. So don't be discouraged. Okay. So A1C coming down. That was the next thing that we had. Then we can also focus on our energy becomes more consistent. Okay. So we talked about how we would eat and how we would feel tired after meals, or that afternoon crash that you have like at 2 o'clock and like you had lunch, but you still got, 3 more hours of work to do. What can I do? You avoid those. You start to feel more steady energy throughout the day. Okay. You may even see this energy change before your A1C starts to come down. And usually this energy change is what keeps people going over time. I even noticed this sometimes myself, like when I'm eating more inflammatory foods like high in sugar, lots of desserts, ice cream. This is like coming up with the summertime. And I used to tell my cousins like, hey, it's a sunny day. That means it's ice cream day, stuff like that. Then I start to feel more tired because those blood sugar spikes. So you would notice a difference in your energy level. And again, the energy, when you feel this difference, you're like, I want to continue to feel good, because you didn't realize how bad you felt until you start to feel good. So energy becomes more consistent as your blood sugars become more stable. You decrease that inflammation that's going on. Okay. Next, which people are very surprised with, is that your hunger and cravings often decrease. How about that? Okay. When your blood sugars are unstable, it drives hunger and cravings more. Like, I don't know why I can't stop eating this. But then you're like, oh, now that I'm better, I don't have that inflammation that what we call a gut microbiome is actually transforming. Then we don't have those cravings. Okay. So you actually become less hungry, you have less cravings, you're feeling satisfied longer, and that is just like again, positive reinforcement to keep going, because remember, these are lifestyle changes, not diets that we're doing. We want to make sure that we're making these changes to sustain over a lifetime, not just for the time being, not just for a certain time period. Okay. Next, our body composition may begin to shift. So, what it may not always be dramatically at first, but gradually, where we actually starts to go from storing the energy to actually burning the energy. And so, what does that mean? When we burn energy, we lose that fat that's building up, especially around the midsection and our thighs and hips. Okay. And then finally, inflammation can decrease. And that's where we want. Okay. That's what we really, really want. We want that inflammation down, because when that inflammation is not there, we don't have that chronic stress of inflammation going on in our bodies that creates that environment to where it builds up all those other things, like the insulin resistance, chronically feeling tired, the cravings. We actually see that inflammation start to go down. And you're not going to see it externally, but internally that's what's going on. Okay. And as that stress comes down, um, again, we don't see those chronic blood sugars staying high blood sugars, and it actually starts to stabilize, and our entire system begins to function totally different. All right. So that is the ultimate goal. I know we feel better, we want to see those numbers come down, but when we can get rid of that chronic inflammation, that's going to change our whole metabolic health. Okay. So now that you know that this was happening, what can we actually do to show improvement? Okay. So what determines how much improvement is possible? That is the question. Because can everyone do this? I really believe yes. But there's a different amounts of chronic inflammation in our bodies from person to person. Okay. So just because two people have a diagnosis of diabetes that can be a diagnosis at the same time, one may not have just picked it up as early because they were not getting their numbers checked, but they may have a different amount of inflammation. Okay. So again, not everyone's patterns look the same. So it could be very frustrating, especially sometimes for women, because they see sometimes men actually improve longer or quicker. But what actually makes a improvement possible? Again, the decrease in the inflammation, like again, it looks different. So what actually contributes to what actually determines this? It's actually how long diabetes has been present, not necessarily how long diabetes has been diagnosed. Okay, because again, you can have diabetes, a diagnosis of diabetes. You can have diabetes longer than your actual diagnosis, is what I want to say. Then also, time you get a diagnosis of diabetes, who knows how long the insulin resistance has been present, right? Because remember, we said the insulin resistance come before the elevated blood sugars, because our body is resilient. It's trying to keep those blood sugars down. So the insulin level is going higher and higher and higher, and that's causing more inflammation. So we have that insulin resistance that's present long before that. Okay. So we just want to be very aware of what's going on with that there. Also, our quality of sleep um, actually contributes. Our consistent daily habits, how much stress we're going through on a daily basis. So people can have different stress levels, different jobs, different family dynamics. All this can be contributing to your how much improvement you can make over and in what period of time, and then also your overall metabolic health. One person may also have a high cholesterol and high blood pressure, and they also may be significantly overweight compared to another. So all this actually makes a difference. Okay, so your progress is based on your starting point and what you do consistently moving forward. It does not help to compare your journey with someone else, because again, it's hard to know. Even like I said, you're going to the same day, same time, and you both were diagnosed with diabetes on the same day. It's still so many other different factors that can go on. So do not compare your journey with someone else. Okay, and that's in all of life. And sometimes we take a longer time to learn this, but just remember that. Okay, so what most of the time we get wrong when we're going through our journey here is that if my numbers improve, I'm done. No, that's not the case. Okay, we want to again look at the way our body responds, because our body responds to patterns, and maintaining those patterns make a difference. The next, which is huge, is not just like my numbers are better, but I'm done, but I need to be perfect and perfect all the time. And they're like, I see and hear, and I had struggled with this before, like feeling guilty about not being able to eat, my 5 to 9 servings of vegetables every single day, or I wasn't able to exercise today. I hear people say that, or I'm not able to exercise every day because my kids have this and that. And there's no need to be perfect. We just want to be consistent. Okay. So if one day we fall off the wagon and it runs us over, just get back up the next day and keep going. Okay. It's not only about being perfect and being perfect every single day, every single meal. Okay. We just want to try to be consistent and consistent over time, because again, this is the long haul. This is decades of changes that you're going to sustain. And again, some days are going to be better than others. Some years are going to be better than others. Some decades are going to be better than others. But that's okay. You can still continue to go. Okay. And I alluded to this earlier, but it's not just about your blood sugars. Okay. Even though, again, that is a number that we look at, we want to know that it's not just about blood sugars. Okay. It's more about our food patterns. It's about our insulin resistance. It's about how much saturated fat that we take in. And if you have not seen my other videos about saturated fat and how it relates to diabetes and insulin resistance, go and actually watch those videos, because I go into detail with that. It's about eating those refined carbs, like our white bread, white rice, cereals, sugary cereals, things of that nature. And also about not getting our quality sleep, our restorative sleep, sleeping 8 hours every night, and about our stress levels. And a lot of people, we focus on our stress from external sources, but we can actually control how we respond to those external sources. Okay. So we cannot control what things externally happen, but we can control how we respond. So we want to actually have a good stress relieving routine every single day. Again, not necessarily have to be perfect with it, but we want to be consistent, because that's going to help us decrease that inflammation. Because remember, chronic stress, whether it's the way we look at it as mental health or stress physically, actually plays a big role in our blood sugars and in a diagnosis with diabetes. Okay. And movement. And again, I always think when I say movement, and I'm sitting here on this video and I should be moving around, but hey, we're going to move in a minute. And if you're listening to this video and you have not moved for today, use this as a reminder to get up, move around, walk up and down the hallway. If you're at work, go outside if you can. If it's a nice day, it's sunny outside, I'm going to be walking in a minute, and go for at least a 10-minute walk. You can do 20 minutes, you can do 30 minutes, you can do an hour, whatever you can do some type of movement on a regular basis. Okay. All right. So what can we do? Let's get practical, because Dr. Amanda, I hear all these things, but what can I do to move forward? Okay. We've done a lot with meal building in previous videos, just in a few weeks before this. So go back and look about how you can actually build your meals. Again, I'll just go high level focus. Every meal should have a carbohydrate, non-refined, so a whole carbohydrate, whole food carbohydrate, like our oatmeal. And I had some people, they said they can't have oatmeal anymore, but I was like, make sure you pair it with a good amount of fiber, a good plant-based protein, and a healthy fat. So instead of, like I said, just oatmeal, you add chia seeds and walnuts and berries. Okay, the chia seeds have some protein in there, has some fiber in there. You have some healthy fat with the the walnuts, and chia seeds have the fiber, and berries have the fiber. So, hey, we are doing a lot better. So, just like look at the other videos of how you can actually pair your meals together, okay? And actually, I want to really emphasize the plant based proteins. I cannot leave without talking about the plant based proteins because when I talk about protein, people always focus on meat, beef, chicken, pork, whatever. And it was funny over the last weekend, I was at an event and people were talking about their meat that they eat and the bacon. Oh my gosh. And I was just like, for the love of bacon, like everyone I talk to, they just love their bacon. I was like, they was like, it's just so good. It's just so good. I was like, there's nothing good about bacon. And I had them laughing. I was like, because it just smells like burnt flesh to me. But anyway, that's just a side note. But it's just like very interesting. Some foods that people like they just have to have. But bacon is a lot of saturated fat, a lot of salts, a lot. So saturated fat, salt, a lot of inflammation that's going to cause in our bodies. Okay, so we just want to be careful with some of the foods that we choose to eat that we're just like, it's just so good, I have to have it. So if you have to have it, as a thing to look at, like, because we want to be consistent and we want to be consistent long term, we may just consider not having it every day or not every time we have a breakfast meal that we love. Maybe like we'll switch this out for something healthier. So switch out like some whole grains for it or some leafy greens with it instead. Okay, so just be careful with some of the foods that we just feel like we have to have. Okay, because we have to be mindful of that saturated fat, because that saturated fat again is what's the underlying cause of that glue, that gunk that keeps that door from opening for our insulin resistance. Okay, so we want to be very consistent with that. And as I already said, we want to make sure we're moving our body regularly over time. Okay, so even light movements after meals helps your muscles use the glucose or sugar. So that's what I really been trying to have people focus on with their movement, instead of just doing random exercises, which is good. Our body needs to move all the time. But especially with the diagnosis of diabetes, we want to try to move after meals, okay? So that way it's teaching our body how to actually use the glucose that we just ate, okay? So moving after meals is very, very important, especially after your larger meal of the day. So use that after dinner, try to move the dinner time up an hour so that way you can walk afterwards, and you will actually find lots of improvement with that. You actually find that your sleep is better because of that. Okay, so we want to actually support our sleep, because the next thing is we want to sleep better because poor quality of sleep actually promotes insulin resistance, and we want to actually have better insulin sensitivity. So if we sleep and have better quality of sleep, then our insulin sensitivity improves. Okay, and we want to stay focused on consistency, not perfection. So if you get nothing else, I want to make sure that you say, I'm going to be consistent, even though I'm not going to be perfect. Okay. So actually, well, let's type that in chat. I'm going to be consistent, even though I'm not going to be perfect. Okay. Because your body responds to what you do repeatedly. Okay. So as we come close to the end of this video, don't forget to like and share the video. Please, 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 so more people can hear this message and not wondering if a diagnosis of diabetes has to be a life sentence, okay? Because we want you to be encouraged. We want you to be hopeful, that know that this can actually improve. Your diabetes can improve. Can it be reversed? For some people, the numbers can return to non-diabetic range. For others, numbers improve significantly. And as we continue to work, I do believe that consistent work over time can actually cause your diabetes to go into remission. But you may just need a little bit more assistance with Atkins Enlightenment Lifestyle Medicine or some type of lifestyle medicine approach that can help. Okay, so anyway, in both cases, whether you go from a diabetic range to a non-diabetic range, or your blood sugars go from being 350 down to 185, that's all improvement. It's decreasing that chronic inflammation in the body. Okay, so our body can improve, and that's what matters. Okay, so your story does not have to be fixed. Your story does not have to be your family history. Your body responds to what you do consistently. Your body responds to what you do consistently. your body responds to what you do consistently. All right. So let's continue on with our health and wellness by responding consistently. Okay. So, and that means change is possible when our body actually gets the consistent changes that it needs. Okay. So, blessing health to y'all. Don't forget to like and share this video. And of course, if you need more assistance, don't forget to reach out to me at Atkins Enlightenment Lifestyle Medicine at www.drmandymd.com. And I look forward to working with y'all in the future. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. All right. Bye bye, everybody. Like, share, like, share, like, share. Bye bye.